Thank you.
Steve, you were in gloves during the meeting?
Well, it was been cold in my office all morning and I put them on, so I can catch up now.
Thank
The kids were really
Whatever is comfortable.
judging. Yeah.
When I used to work at ODOT Region 2, that building was freezing.
Okay.
Thank you.
I used to wear the half gloves where I worked in aviation.
Oh, that's what I should.
Yeah, those ones that fingerless, they were handmade. I got them at a craft thing and they were just fantastic. All right, so I see Trevor, Sadie. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have quorum. Okay. So I'd like to call to order the Salem-Keizer Air Transportation Study for Tuesday, November 28th, 2023, and we will go through roll call. So I'll start off, Kathy Clark, Chair, Mayor of Keizer.
Wow, Lamar, Polk County Community.
Sarah Duncan, I'm the alternate for Chariots, so I'm just an observer unless you.
Okay.
Okay.
Salem-Keizer School Board.
Me, okay. Ashley Briers with the Federal Highway Administration.
Julie Hanson, City of Salem, staff.
Teresa Wisenhunt, I'm staff.
Mike Jaffe with SKATS staff. Steve Dobrinich, SKATS staff as well.
All right, and members on the screen, Anna,
Good afternoon, Anna Henson, ODOT.
Trevor,
Trevor Phillips, Salem City Councilor.
Sadie,
Sadie Carney, Chariots Board member.
and then Della is representing. Find that unmute.
I think it's gonna be Onsville this time.
Yes.
Yeah, she's here from.
Okay. And then,
Yes, I'm here for City of Almsville.
thank you. I just saw Mayor Horning. So he's going to connect. He's still connecting. There we go. Steve Horning. Hello. Can you hear us? We'll get an acknowledgement. And then staff, we have Brandon,
Brandon Williams, ODOT Region 2 staff.
Shofi,
Shofiola Zoom with Chariots.
Andrew,
Andrew Walker with ODOT.
Alvin,
Alvin Clausen, Government Relations for Marion County.
Lanny,
Lonnie Radke, Marion County.
and then from the public, Tammy,
Tammy Kunz, Keizer Community Diversity Engagement Committee and Greater Northeast Keizer Neighborhood Association President.
thank you. Is there anybody I missed?
And Jacqueline Grain, Vice President, Northeast Keizer Neighborhood Association.
All right, thank you, Tammy and Jacqueline. Did I miss anybody?
You might be Steve.
Okay, Steve,
Hello?
hello, now we can hear you.
Yeah, our whole bank's email system went down about 10 minutes ago, so I scrambled with a laptop.
All right, welcome
We're good now.
aboard. Anybody I missed? Do you want to let Christy in? Thank you. All right. Christy, do you want to introduce yourself and your affiliation? Oh, she probably can't hear us yet. Chris, oh, connecting to audio. Right. There we go. Hi, Christy. Could you introduce yourself and your affiliation, please? Nope.
She's muted.
Okay. Let's see if we can get her introduced. Okay, let's go on then to the approval of the PC minutes from October 24th, 2023. Were there any additions or corrections? If not, motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Phillips,
Second.
seconded by Anna Henson. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Public comment, this time is provided for members of the public to address the policy committee for SKATS. Want to acknowledge for the record that we received a letter from Jody Blackman, who states that she is a resident of the West Salem.
She's on Broadway.
Oh, she's on Broadway, sorry. So resident of Salem. Therese Holmstrom. And
And this morning I sent you one from, that we got last night from,
Right.
Daenerys y Campesinos Unidos.
right. Bakun. Yeah, so Therese Holmstrom, she identify a city that she lives in or an organization? Looks like it's cut off.
Well, executive director of PICU is her organization.
Oh, Teresa Holmstrom is the executive director of Bakun?
No.
That's what I'm looking for. Second one, I don't see.
Teresa Holmstrom, no, she didn't remember the public as far as I know.
Okay, but didn't identify what city or county.
No,
Okay,
into the email, so.
all right. And then Reina Lopez, the executive director of Bakun. And wasn't there one more?
Yeah, in the packet that went out from Friends of Marion.
Right, what's his, Roger K, the president of Friends of Marion County. Okay, so those are acknowledged for the record. And is there anyone who would like to address the policy committee today from the public during this time? Okay, we will then go to the, before we go to item D, we have had a request from Marion County, since none of the commissioners can be here today for the discussion on the MPO structure discussion. I think this was sent out in the email that we go ahead and schedule that for January. We will not be meeting in December. I don't know about y'all, but it's gonna be a little busy. Is there any objection to moving this to January to ensure that we have the full participation by all the members of the policy committee? We are not up against the timeline. I'm hearing no objection.
No objection.
All right.
City Carney.
Sadie, Dr. Carney?
Yeah, is it just the conversation that we are delaying? Or we're delaying a decision? What's the, I guess I've become a little bit confused on the path forward.
Path forward right now is to determine as an organization how this will move forward with the, with bringing in Almsville, the request for Salem for a second representative and vote. And that conversation needs to happen with all of the members present as much as possible. And I support Marion County's request that we do this in January, so we can make sure Marion County is at the table.
Yeah, I can agree that they should be here for a conversation. I'm not sure that reading the information that was supplied by SKATS staff in the packet, that I feel like the conversation that we should be having is as narrow as you just described. It seems like there's a lot more room and options 2 and 3. So I would just encourage us to have kind of an open-minded conversation when we do come to a point where we're able to discuss it with all members at the table.
That will be the will of the policy committee as a whole.
How's staff doing on, like, because I mean, like, I know that this is like a process that like more things get added in, and so I just want to make sure that staff is okay with like continuing to table the discussion.
We are, because there's no immediate deadline to add Almsville.
or making other changes. We can do that anytime in 2024, I guess. So I think tabling it now is fine. And then next steps are really to figure out what you as a group want to use as next steps. You know, is it a short discussion and a decision, or is it a prolonged discussion with multiple options that require more meetings and maybe a facilitator or not? So I think that's the path this committee needs to determine for itself. And that we've had those discussions some back in August. And I think starting in January, we'll pick that up from where we left off, and hopefully that discussion will take us further down the line to that decision of, are we agreed to what should happen? Or do we need a facilitator? What are the issues in front of us that people need to bring up so we can get preferably consensus on the structure? I don't want to be too prescribed because I want to leave it to you to decide how you as a group need to go through this process.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we're not taking like any particular action, so I'm okay with making sure that everybody from the PC is participating. I just do worry that because I mean, this is just a discussion section, that it might drag it out a little bit further, but I mean, if everyone's okay with delaying this discussion, then I'm fine with it.
I think we probably need, plenty of discussion before a decision is made. I think Clark has more other opinions, but I think starting in January, we'll do some more discussion. Whether or not there's any action taken in January, that'll be up to you. Actually, get a facilitator or not, or just continue the discussion in February, assuming we were discussing it in January. I'm going to have Teresa, since most of the people on the committee, or except for Marion County, are on the line, just to make sure people can be here in January. I'm going to have Teresa contact each one of you and make sure your calendars are clear for that date so you can attend. And then they'll do the same for Marion County. Same for Mayor Hoy, since Councilor Phillips has requested Mayor Hoy be part of that discussion, and I don't know his calendar, so I want to make sure that we can do it when all those people can be in the room to talk about it. So I'm saying January now, after Teresa contacts people and schedules get firm, roll, no more.
And for the record, mark it on January 23rd. That's the 4th Tuesday. I specify because January has 5 Tuesdays. So it's not the last Tuesday, it's the 4th Tuesday. Make sure we get that to your calendar so we can set aside that time for that purpose. Okay. With Sarah, with Sadie's okay. Sorry, you're the alternate.
Yeah, I would just, if we could have these same packet materials in our January packet, this is very helpful. Thank you.
I just have a scheduling question. Just to clarify, you said that you think this will take multiple meetings.
I don't know.
Okay.
We should be, whatever it will take, it'll take. So
Cool. if it does take multiple meetings, does that mean that we will need to coordinate with the commissioner and the mayor for each discussion? Will we only be having these discussions if they're both here? Just from I want to be able to kind of know, because this was kind of pulled at the last minute. So if we're going to be here and we're planning, just for my mental knowing, does that mean that we're only going to talk about that if they're available to be here?
well, at least for this first meeting, let's try to arrange it so that as many members that can make it, preferably everyone, on the policy committee can be here for the 28th, plus the mayor. Like I said, I don't know the Mayor Hoy's schedule right now.
23rd.
On the 23rd. Yeah, that's the 28th.
Yes.
Sorry. That's today. I keep thinking of it today. The 23rd of January. So let's try to get that first meeting, scheduled and started, and then see what outcome is from that discussion. And then we will see if, for example, maybe Mayor Hoy only wants to attend that first one, or maybe he wants to attend each one that we have subsequently. So I don't know, that'll be up to him.
I thought we were delaying it because the commissioner couldn't be here.
That is true.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
Mayor Hoy is available today, but all three Marion County Commissioners have a pre-scheduled event today or retreat. And when they did that, they did not take into consideration it was going to trump on this meeting.
Mayor Hoy was planning to be here today, so.
okay.
Very much involved in the full conversations that are happening. And
For the
recognizing there are many.
semantics, clarification, I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Let's see about our projects. So let's then go to back to my agenda here. Item D, which is the amendments to the 24-29 tip. And there are 4 in your packet. You can walk us through, and I believe we have representatives from Salem and Marion County to assist in this as well, and ODOT.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Okay, so there are, as mentioned, 4 amendments, 4 full amendments that are proposed, and we'll be asking for policy committee approval of resolutions 23-22 through 23-25. I'll just start going through them. And I pulled up the amendment summary page, which is in the packet as part of section D. I think it's page 22 of the PDF if you're following that way, but I have it pulled up and hopefully I'll zoom in a little bit so it's hopefully a little clearer. Okay, so this first one is for the creation of a new project that was approved through the Oregon Community Paths Program. This is a state grant program that was new a couple of years ago, maybe in 2021. But City of Salem applied for and received 2 different grants that are now being added to the TIP and the STIP. This first one is for the construction of the missing segment of the Pringle Creek path. This is along the north bank of Pringle Creek and is going to connect the path from the Salem Civic Center to the Riverfront Park. And so in total, it's a $6.6 about $1 million project. And of that, 6 million is federal funds that are awarded through this state discretionary program. And then the remaining amount is local match that City of Salem can provide. So that's the first one. This next one is the same community paths program. It's for the study of a pedestrian overcrossing on Oregon 22. It's not including construction, so that's why the total cost is quite a bit lower. It's a $300,000 refinement. Well, I think it's a planning study. I shouldn't quite say refinement, but it's a planning study to look at an approximately 500-foot pedestrian path between Lancaster and Corder Road in an area where there's, I think it's Miller Elementary and a connection into our property on the south side of 22 there. So again, that's part of the Oregon Community Paths program. The third amendment, and this may be where there's the majority of the questions, and I'll go through the parts of this the best I can. Also, Andrew Walker's on the line, who's the project manager for the Center Street Bridge project. So essentially this amendment is to move $3 million of discretionary funds from the construction phase to the preliminary engineering phase, which is the phase that they are either in right now or getting ready to head into the PE phase. So it's to help keep the project moving in the time and place that it is right now. The other aspect is we're adding 3 bridge locations just to reflect the updated project scope. And since there were a couple questions about that, I did pull up the map here at the bottom. I hope that's readable for folks. It's a little bit small, but the 3 bridge locations that are being added are on the east bank here, The Z6 southbound ramp, that's a part of the retrofit, and that's why it's being added to the project. The Z5 northbound ramp is not part of the retrofit, but there's some work being done to isolate that section so that if there is an earthquake event, it wouldn't impact the rest of the bridge that is being retrofit and damage the bridge that's being upgraded. And then on the west bank is the Z4 ramp. This one is being added to the project as well, although there's no retrofit happening there. ODOT is working on investigating future solutions for the Z4 West ramp. And there was a presentation about this in, I think it was the August MWAC meeting about some more of the general details about the project. But those are the changes as part of that amendment. And I could kind of pause there and either go to the last amendment, or if there are questions now, we can kind of jump into those. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have a question on Z5. Is that coming off of commercial southbound where it turns onto the bridge, or am I? Oh no, this is eastbound. Never mind. This is the one that curves around and connects into Front Street. Got it. Okay. Rain. So isn't there a pedestrian circular path that parallels that, and is that part of the project? I see the pedestrian path and spiral ramp.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So yeah, there is a pedestrian connection there, and it is not part of the project. It's already isolated, so it won't affect the bridge in a seismic event in any significant way, but we are not retrofitting that to survive a Cascadia subduction zone level event.
All right. Now follow-up question on that. For bike ped, the Union Street Railroad, the bike ped bridge, that was the old railroad crossing. Is that anticipated to be the primary for bike ped and emergency vehicles in Cascadia?
As far as I understand, that structure would also not survive. So as far as bike ped, I don't know what the plan is. Maybe Anna can speak to that for the greater region.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Chair Clark. No plan that I'm aware of, like right now.
Well, and Commissioner Morhorse just reminded me about the big weights at the top of that, the Union Street structure that are very, very costly to deal with. So, okay, thank you. That helps clarify that for me. Any other questions on the three projects discussed thus far, especially this Center Street Bridge? Director Carney.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Can we scroll up to the info related? I'm just looking for details around like the construction phases in terms of timeline.
Okay, that'll be on this page then. So this is the updated info after the change. But I think probably what you want to look at is you see the PE preliminary engineering, 2021, right of ways in 2024, and then construction in 2025.
Yeah.
Really quick, we just recently, and I imagine Andrew can talk to this a little bit better than I can, but that construction date's going to get pushed out. We ended up having to do an individual consultation with our National Marine Fisheries, and that process is going to add some time onto our schedule. So probably construction's more like 2026. Andrew, did I butcher that?
No, I think that's probably right. I need to work with Dal to nail down exactly what the impacts will be on that, but I'll put that amendment in the future with some water line work that we're working on the city with. There's a water line that goes along this bridge that we're working with the city to retrofit to make sure it's seismically resilient as well, that feeds West Salem. And so there will be a future amendment. So we'll include that schedule change and that water line in the future amendment.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
So my question then, with this amendment, we're looking at amending more P and E. As that information comes in, is that what's being anticipated?
Yeah, for the water line, there would be additional construction cost and PE. And the city would be contributing to that additional cost to cover that water line, if that was the question.
Partly. What I'm hearing is there's additional planning and engineering that's gonna go into this as we've gone through the layers of what's attached to this structure, how it interfaces with the both sides of the river. So it sounds like as we're getting into the details, there's gonna be some additional pieces that are gonna have to be considered, like we're seeing here with the 3 bridge structures. And now the water, and then the big one, and we've seen this with a lot of our projects, doesn't have to do with pavement, it has to do with water. And National Marine Fisheries is not a fast mover. I'm saying this with having had experience.
Yes, me too.
All right.
Let me just add on to that because people that are here in the SKATS meeting may not have attended the ACT meeting where Andrew presented this project. The $3 million in our adding to the preliminary engineering phase on this project is also to fund a planning study for that West End situation. Number one, to see what's the right fix down there, not just with the bridge, but the whole intersection. And then also like some sort of emergency, we'll develop some sort of emergency plan in the hopes that when the seismic project gets done on the center span and the east spans, that we will have, and we get a Cascadia subduction event, that we will have a plan to make that connection to the west side fast. Unless we get some money to replace those bridges. But for right now, that's kind of the plan on why we're moving this money into PE. And again, Andrew, if I misspoke, please correct me.
No, I think everything you said was accurate. Just to clarify though, it's a phased approach. So as in the initial phase of construction, we would not retrofit those west ramps. That the planning study and design would look at what the best solution is there. Because when we went with a retrofit option, it just didn't make sense. It was very difficult to retrofit. It may not have even been a very effective retrofit. Its cost was nearly the replacement of a new bridge. And so going the direction of reevaluating those west ramps for a replacement in the future made the most sense. And so that's why we're adding some additional funding in there to really come up with the best solution. So phase 1 of this project would be to retrofit the river spans on the east side, and then phase 2 would be to replace at some point those west ramps.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm glad Andrew brought that up and Anna brought that up because I want this committee and the public to know what's anticipated, that the seismic upgrades will go on for portions of the bridge, but that west side is more the study of what we can do and what we might have to do in an emergency, as far as I understand what Andrew was saying. So that part won't be upgraded, but it'll lead us to options going forward. And I think that's important for us to know as a region, you know, that uses that bridge all the time, but also what might be our role in identifying that to the legislature to say, you know, we want a permanent fix, and we hope down the line you'll be able to provide us funds for that fix. So.
Well, and just one more follow-up with that information. Also, we'll be able to speak to our federal delegation about the appropriate level of funding needing to come in this area, because this is a lifeline. This is a priority 1 for the Mid-Willamette Valley, as I understand it, to be able to have at least one crossing between Marion and Polk County. I'm not thinking of any other place in the region that will span the river on the pontoons.
Yeah. You know, you look at the state plan, which I haven't looked at in a while, but you know, they identify all the, I'm not exactly sure the phrase they use, but the highest priority routes in the state that they want to strengthen in the case of the Cascadia And Highway 22 isn't on that highest level list. It's down maybe level 3 or whatever it is. So it's definitely very important to us in our region. Statewide, it's not as high as we'd like it, but ODOT has its reasons as far as, you know, in an emergency, getting supplies to the coast is a high priority. Their highest priority probably is getting supplies to the coast. And then fixing the most critical damage of the interstates, things like that. So yeah, locally, if we had that kind of event, it would be catastrophic, you know, statewide, and then locally, we would have to figure out what we do, you know, to provide that connection between our two counties, Marion and Polk County. Hopefully, the size of upgrade will be done before that kind of Cascadia in 2026, but you know, that's crossing our fingers, and that's why what us doing is the extra steps of what do we do on the west side if that portion is not done.
Counselor Phillips?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Andrew, for presenting on this. Chair Clark, you'd asked a question I'd asked in one of the MWAC meetings previously about the pedestrian bridge. So yeah, it's good to track what will and won't be likely to survive after the seismic retrofit is done. I think this might be the first time, though, with drawing the highlights to the sections. Andrew, or whoever is piloting the slideshow, could you bring us back to the slide that shows, you know, what is being fixed and what isn't being fixed, with the segments?
Yes, I'll pull that up.
So I guess my concern in looking at this and really thinking about this closely right now is that Z4 is going to be looked at for future stuff, but is not part of the seismic retrofit. Is that correct?
Z1 and Z4. So those two west ramps.
I mean, so I guess my concern in hearing that, and just, you know, we'll have a bridge that survives a seismic event, but will there be any way to get to this bridge?
Yeah, so that's
on the west side.
That's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it. So that's part of the planning study. So part of the planning study is, okay, long-term, how do we replace these and what do they look like? But the second half, which Anna mentioned briefly, was an emergency plan response or emergency response plan to how we would reconnect that. And we've brainstormed a few alternatives that we could put in place that would make that quicker to restore access to the bridge in the event of a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. Some of those would be like stockpiling materials so that we could fill and get up to the bridge quickly. Bailey Bridge was another option we discussed, having equipment nearby. I think what I want to highlight here, though, is that it's a step in the right direction. You're reconnecting this bridge from, potentially years to weeks. So even if these ramps do go down, we can reconnect much more quickly than we would if we did nothing. But you're right, we wouldn't have immediate access.
Thank you. And I mean, it's tough to look at the reality of that situation, but weeks is much better than years. And then, I mean, I presume that based on what I'm hearing now is that the other bridge comes over too, and it basically cuts off Wallace Road from connecting to this bridge. And I assume that there's an overpass, further west where the rest of Salem comes in. I forget what businesses are out there, but it's just I guess we just need to communicate to the community that for a little bit, there will be no access to this bridge. So it'll be better to have the bridge standing than not standing. I fully appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, God forbid anything happens between now and the time that we can get those west ramps replaced, because it's not the final plan to just retrofit part of the bridge. We'd like to get the west ramps replaced as well.
Yeah.
But the reality is we don't really even know what that replacement would look like. If we're gonna replace, it doesn't make sense necessarily, or maybe it does, but to replace in kind, I think we can solve some of the traffic issues there as well if we're replacing. And so we really just need to look at what the best option is over there before we before we start walking down that route.
And I mean, I guess part of the water stuff that we're looking at, because of, you know, the majority of West Salem water goes through that line, is how is it impacted by the fact that it doesn't include Z1 and Z4? Do we know if the water splits off before then?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You got some good ones. I'm glad you're asking these because these are all points that I'd like to bring up. So we have looked at that. The water comes off of the bridge before you hit Z1. So we can retrofit the water line to continue to be functional with phase 1 of this construction. So that will continue to function. And not only will it function, we're upsizing it to have a larger capacity for the city.
Yep. That's good. That's my questions on this. Thank you.
Oh, that's been fabulous. This is very, very helpful. Director Carney.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Agreed. These are great questions, and I'm glad to have the answers to them to add to my notes and director's report. Can we just talk briefly, and maybe, I mean, this is out of scope on this project, way out of scope, totally different project. What is the status for the Marion Street Bridge? And do we have any timeline associated with upgrades for that? Or is it just the Center Street Bridge that we are looking at retaining?
Goodbye.
Yeah, there's no plans. I think I can't remember what year we did the bridge studies, but basically the Marion Street Bridge, there's no retrofitting it. Director Carney, it's just, I can't remember how old it is. Probably Andrew knows, maybe 1938.
Heading on 100 years, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just gonna drop. And what will happen on the Center Street Bridge in that event is the Center Street Bridge will become a two-way bridge. So we'll have both directions once we hook up the west end. So hopefully that helps you feel a little more comfortable in the event, if the event happens. But Marion Street is expected to fall into the river.
And the Ped Bridge.
Well, and I think City of Salem owns the Ped Bridge. It's not ODOT's, but that's my understanding. But maybe if someone else from the city knows the answer to that, but I would imagine. I mean, it's an old railroad bridge. So,
Julie, Hanson's here.
I do not know the answer to that. I'm not sure that we've looked into that.
That'd be a good follow-up. Commissioner Moorhorse.
So I was part of a group to take a look at strategic efforts once the big one hits. On the pedestrian bridge, the counterweight suspended, the size of them will get to swinging in the shaking of the weights of those will supposedly take the bridge down. They were poured in place, so it's very difficult and expensive to replace them on that bridge. The other existing bridges that we'll have left standing in the region, the closest north one is the one that is fairly new. It's supposed to withstand it. And then south is the one all the way in Corvallis. The bridge in Albany is not going to be standing, but we do have the two ferries that could possibly be in use. But that's all we'll have, and that's a maybe on those. So the main reason we're looking at is how do we get access from the west side constituents to the hospital and medical services throughout Willamette Valley. So for us, McMinnville or Corvallis would be our closest hospitals and emergency response units to take people to if you're on the west side of the river. And even getting through downtown could be a challenge, even if this bridge is retroactive to get access to the hospital right away. So that's kind of what we're all facing. So this bridge and this water line, and thank you, Councilor Phillips, for bringing up that, because that is, I believe it's 75 or 8% of the total water for the West Salem residents is across that one bridge.
Richard, this is Pressy.
Thank you. So not to further deviate the conversation, and because the whole third bridge thing happened when I first moved here. So is there any future plans, and I don't know who like it would fall in for but to help kind of support what you're talking about, Commissioner Morhosh, is just how would, like, what can we do to continue to connect these two in this event? And I don't know who that would belong to. And I know that we just recently took that third bridge off of like.
It was a 12-year process, $8 million of studies. So
And it'll be 20 years from that date before we can get federal funding to build a new bridge.
if we get a plan that is approved for the design, and there is currently not one, because that process resulted in a recommendation of a no build, because if we didn't, we were gonna have to pay US DOT back the $8 million for the study. So it just had to get a period put on it and put on the shelf.
And it'll be 20 years from.
From the vote of a no build
Okay.
at the earliest.
To be able to get funding, if a project were approved, we'd have to get in the queue with everybody else in the US, because it's going to require federal funding without a question. It's way too expensive, and we're dealing with the same issues with Center Street Bridge. We've got floodways, we've got waterways, we have National Marine Fisheries ways in, and other issues as well. It is complex, it is doable. But it's gonna take everybody coming to the table to have that conversation again for the 5th time. It's been four rounds since 1970 something, 60 something,
I think the 60s.
1960s, yeah. So it's been around the block a few times.
I appreciate that brief overview, because like I said, that I remember that vote being made like the year that I moved here. So I have like very little background, especially because like once I moved here, everybody's like, we don't want to talk about it. Which is like, I mean, like, I understand.
Yeah, I know that the records are here for the Salem River Crossing project between the COG and the city of Salem have those records, and those will be available, those are publicly available. I'm gonna go to Councilor Phillips and then Mayor Horning.
And ODOT.
Oh.
And ODOT would have the records.
And ODOT would have records.
They were the primary, City of Salem, ODOT was a primary.
I have a copy of it on my shelf if anybody wants to come visit.
I use 2 of them to hold my monitors up on my desk.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I support a regional solution. I'm not opposed to a third bridge. But I think, you know, my question would be, wouldn't just replacing Marion Bridge be like a priority at some point in our future? I don't actually know the answer to that question, but I mean, it's not going to survive. So getting it up to date would probably be at least as important as a future connection between these two counties. And then minor comment, we do have an emergency access hospital in Dallas. It's not really a true full service, but it's got more and more capabilities. So, you know, people don't have to go all the way to McMinnville or Corvallis. Nothing against those two communities. I used to volunteer when I was at Linfield at the hospital in McMinnville. So yeah, I think that concludes my comments. I really don't know the answer though, since we are just accepting that we'll lose 2 of our 3 bridges. Is there any like current timing or prioritization for eventually replacing the Marion Street Bridge? That would be my question.
That's a great question. Before we go to the answer to that, though, I do want to acknowledge and thank Salem Health, which has been making significant investments into the West Valley Hospital. And we've been getting updates as elected officials on that progress because of meeting needs locally for people, for especially for emergent care. So I want to acknowledge that for effort with a big thanks.
And I'll second that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so to the question at hand, who's going to take that one, or I can Mayor Horning and circle back.
Yeah, I'll take it. Councilor Phillips, there's no plans right now to replace the Marion Street Bridge. And so I'm not sure. It's something I could look into with our bridge section and see like, where is it on our priority list? I think right now the focus is Center Street, and if we can get that project completed, then we are gonna have a two-way crossing. And that's the main focus of that project. So if you want me to follow up, I'm happy to.
Be a really good plan. Anybody
I
else
mean-
Jeff, following up on that?
Yeah, I'd be interested. I mean, maybe it's just not feasible. Like, you know, what does that future look like in the more ideal world of we get the seismic retrofit at Center Street fixed before a future seismic event?
We can help. Mayor Horning.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm relatively new to this whole process, but the meetings I've been in for the catastrophic event we're going to have is we're picturing these multiple bridges and how we use them now. It's going to be more of a survival mode for a certain period of time where we're out of control. And if we have any bridge, if we can get one bridge that says it's going to stand, we think of all the cars on both sides of the river, and very few are going to be able to get to the bridge. It's going to be for your emergency. So if we have an access and a surviving bridge, you know, the thought process of the Z5, the foot bridge, you know, if you need a foot access, you can make that happen as long as the bridge is still standing. And so I think if we can focus on this, we can make this happen and retrofit this. We'll be a step ahead, you know, and then if it's 5 or 10 years and however many millions down the road, this would be a good piece, because it's going to be a nasty little world if this hits us. And so if we have one bridge over there, we can keep some water going and have some kind of access for someone, because you and I probably won't get to drive on the bridge for a while, even if it's open. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Just to add to the conversation, I remember 8-10 years ago, it's probably at an MWAC meeting, and Sonny Chickering came to talk about, you know, seismic events and our bridges. But the part of the message that I remember is that he was saying California and Washington as estates have invested a lot more in seismic upgrades compared to Oregon. I forget the numbers, but you know, hundreds of times the amount of funds are going down to California for all their bridges because of their history of earthquakes. And Oregon just hasn't found the resources to have made that as a priority like California has, and Washington. And it's a big issue statewide. And I don't think anything's changed much in the 8-10 years. And that might have to do with, you know, the way we charge for transportation. So
I think it's a fair statement. Also, it's interesting historically, and to put a period on this, I think, is that Cascadia subduction zone was not something historically known until the last 20, 30 years, when geologists at Oregon State began to put together the patterns of the corings that they were doing. And everybody knew about the earthquakes and so forth, all the faults in California. I mean, they're famous for them. I've been in a few of them, rock and roll. So, and there was a notion that Oregon was relatively safe from earthquakes because we didn't have the same kind of fault structures that you see in California along those mountain ranges and the coastal lines. What wasn't known was about the subduction zone. Now that we know, there is not only a financial playing catch up, because California started making changes decades ago because of their history, but also a perception issue and a perception change that has to happen, where Oregon gets really serious about the reality of our seismic instability. I mean, we're sitting here right now. Most of us may remember the spring break quake. That's pretty much it. But California's had several rock and rollers since then. So they get reminded on a more frequent basis. So I think part of it for as a policy committee to bring it to what we do as policymakers is really to keep it more in the forefront of our thinking and our planning, in our conversations with our legislative delegation, that this needs to factor into how we identify resources, allocate resources, and plan for a long-term future. So thank you for this very significant conversation. And I think it really equips us as policymakers to be better able to communicate on our needs for our region. So I think
Yeah.
I'll leave it there.
Okay, can I just add last comment? I just happened to look at the news. OPB has an article saying Portland's Burnside Bridge to close for 5 years
Yep.
during seismic rebuild starting in 2027. So good for them. They found the money to do it. And I'm sure they have multiple bridges to help them in their area. I don't know where they got the funds for, but.
Okay, and then for the record, the West Salem Neighborhood Association Transportation Chair Nick Forty sent a letter of support for this as well.
Well, he just had some questions,
Comments, yeah.
about, and I think it was distilled pretty well in this conversation. He had questions about the scope and the cost increases, so I'll make sure to, once the minutes and the video are posted, I'll make sure to pass that back on to Nick. And then we did also get on these 3 projects, a letter of public support for the 2 Oregon Community Paths projects, as well as the Center Street Bridge project from Karen Sogren, who also lives in West Salem. So I'm going to mention those. And then to wrap this up, in terms of the amendments conversation, we have the 4th and final one is a amendment to reduce the amount of surface transportation block grant funds going towards our state fiscal year 2025 SKATS planning dollars. So this is a decrease of a total of $390,058. And essentially this is going to be of that 350,000 is federal funding that'll be able to be applied to other projects, and everything has changed just because we determined that there's some carryover from previous years in terms of the MPO planning dollars that will be able to cover the costs in all likelihood, so that this could be freed up for other project requests in the future. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just that we recognize the cost escalation issue we've been living through the last couple of years, and every dollar helps. So when I look at our budgets, I'm trying to provide back to the tip when I can.
I really appreciate the thoughtfulness and thoroughness to help make the dollars do the best that they can for us. So thank you for that. Director Carney, you had a comment or question?
Oh, yeah, I did. I wanted to just add that circling back to the Cascadia subduction, then I do have just a quick question, I think, about this tip amendment. I'm looking at a timeline and it says the average Cascadia subduction earthquake takes place every 246 years. And the last one for Oregon was 315 years ago. We are overdue by 54, 64, 60. We're overdue by 70 years. So timely conversations. And yes, I completely agree with your statements, Chair Clark, about trying to direct our energy as policymakers toward our federal delegation and raising this concern in hopes of getting some federal money to support this kind of work and retrofit for our community.
Thank you.
And then
question.
Yeah, just a question about the MPO planning. Can you just describe for me what falls under that hat?
Well, the MPO planning is the work that we describe in our planning work program. So it funds that planning work program, including all the staff that work on it and any outside costs we have. For example, we're paying for the current Metropolitan Safety Action Plan out of our planning funds.
Okay. And is this extra money kind of showing up by your estimation because there's, due to cost escalations, there are fewer projects to plan for?
No, it's more of a question of when we are determining how much MPO planning support would come from the tip, we're taking our best guess about how much funds we'll need going 4 years as we program it with some increase each year. And we always don't know how much federal PL funds, planning funds outside the tip we'll get. That's a whole other source of funds that come into the state. And there's a formula to share that between MPOs. That's a bit of a guess too, because we don't know exactly how much the state will get, how the distribution formula might change. In fact, we're gonna have discussion in a month or so about updating that formula. So when I put together these estimates, I'm looking at all the sources, I'm looking at increased costs that I might have. So it's all based on those kind of calculations. And like I said earlier, we did have some carryover from previous years because I want to have as much carryover as I can in case there's any shortages. And looking at how much I'll have from 2024, I won't need as much next year. So we decided to reduce it by 300,000, which will reduce each one of your match amounts that I send to your staff saying I'll need a 7,000, 10,000 match depending on how much we program. So that'll be good for the locals, save $3,000 or $4,000, I guess.
I'll take it.
That next year. I'm sure you'll find a way to use it. And then I'm continually monitoring both how much we're spending and how much obviously we might expect coming forward. So
Great, thank you for that.
yeah.
All right. So those are the 4 tip amendments. So on the table now is the action requested to adopt these 4 resolutions. We can do them individually or we can do them as a slate. It is dealer's choice. If someone wants to make a motion.
I'm prepared to make the motion to approve the slate of staff recommended as documented on the screen, resolutions, the 4 of them. And I'm willing to say any additional language the staff recommends.
Second
I'll
that
second
motion.
it.
There we go.
All
Give
right.
Steve.
You give to Steve. All right. Moved by Counselor Phillips, seconded by Mayor Horton to pass resolutions 23-22, 23-23, 23-24, and 23-25 as presented as a slate. Is there any objection to moving them as a slate? Hearing no objection. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for a very thorough conversation on these important projects. Much appreciated. Back to my scrolling. All right. So item E will be tabled to January 23rd. Date, correct? All right. So that will take us then to tip modifications. And Steve, you provided those to us.
Yeah, and I'll reshare my screen again. So these are already approved tip amendments. And there's a few more than typical this time around. And I'll just kind of give an overview of why. The first one is that's a full amendment that was approved at last month's policy committee meeting, adding funds to the McGillcrest intersection realignment. So this is the report out that's taken place and those funds have been added. Numbers 2 through 7 were all staff level administrative amendments. And I'll do this a little out of order. 2, 5, 6, and 7 were in part slipping project phases from 2024 to 2025. The reason for that is we're in our window right now where we can work with ODOT to move funds back a year that we don't expect to obligate without counting against our obligation targets for the coming year. So that's why those are moving back essentially to meet the timeline changes or expectations for those projects and then to meet our obligation targets there. And then I can pause. I see Counselor Phillips has his hand up, so I can pause if you had a question about that.
I have a relatively specific focused question about number 7 on the list, commercial street at Vista to Radcliffe. Is this the intersection at Radcliffe across commercial, or is this the section of commercial that's getting improved, or is it both?
I believe it's just the section, but Julie?
It's a new traffic signal at the intersection and filling in the sidewalk that's missing on the east side of commercial from Ratcliffe going north towards Vista.
But so it does, in a sense, in some way, it creates a traffic signal. So it creates a new kind of intersection.
Yeah, it's a new traffic signal, so
Yeah.
pedestrians can cross and there's a sidewalk connection to it.
And when is construction? I mean, I seemed to memorize that this was going to start to be built or constructed in 2026. Has that changed, or am I wrong on the date?
I believe that the construction funding was starting in 2026.
Okay.
Last I remember, which may mean it's 26 or 27 for construction, sort of depending on the timing of that.
Thank you.
I'll pull it up. I think
Steve's gonna try to clarify.
I think it might be 27, but I should look before I say that.
Nice to get that finished.
And if you can't get the information now, you can just email me. Either way is fine. This happens to be in my ward, and I know people who care a great deal about it.
Mhm.
It is 2026. Is the obligation schedule is for federal fiscal year 2026.
Right, so if it's obligated at the beginning of the fiscal year, it could be constructed in 26, otherwise probably 27 would be a slightly more realistic guess.
Yeah, federal fiscal year starts October 1st, so that would mean you're probably not gonna start a construction project in the fall.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, great question. Any other questions on the tip of modifications?
Skip one. Yeah, well, I just
Oh, you did.
I'll add a couple other notes.
Okay.
I did skip numbers 3 and 4. So 3 is a reduction in the project amount to match the grant funding. This is an ODOT transit project, and so ODOT transit requests to reduce the full amount to match what's in their FTA grant. And then number 4 is might help if I just zoom in on this last section here. Is combining 2 different projects. So the SKATS had programmed STBG funds for bus replacement with chariots, and originally it was programmed into 2 different project key numbers, and chariots staff just requested that they be combined into one and then put into the 2025 fiscal year. So this action is to add those funds together. It's the same total amount of about 3.2 million from SKATS, and overall total of 3.6 million. But it's all going to occur in that and obligate in 2025 instead of what was previously done, which was 2024 and 2026.
Any questions on any of those?
By the way, we coordinate with transit district staff heavily when we talk about, I think they might have even initiated the request to combine it, right? So.
Yep. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, appreciate that, and that will take us then to other business. So our next policy committee meeting will be on January 23rd, 2024. And we will have the conversation about the MPO structure, and we will be reviewing the draft of the next round of the Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP. So enjoy that for some reading pleasure. The next TAC meeting, the Technical Advisory Committee, will be on December 12th. So they are meeting in December. And we also have planning updates. Did you want to talk a little bit about OMPOC?
Didn't bring my notes today. So maybe you'd like to start it off.
Okay. Just very briefly to let people know about what happened at Almpac on November 3rd. So for those who don't know, that's the Oregon Municipal Planning Organization Consortium. It was begun about the time I got on city council, so it's been a long time ago, to bring all the MPOs together to meet on a regular basis to share information and to better collaborate across the state. There are now 8 MPOs to my knowledge. When we started, there were 6. So among the key discussions were the preparation for the 2024 legislative session, understanding that the big push for a transportation package is likely to be in 2025. So a lot of us want to be thinking about not just our own local needs, but also looking at the larger issues around funding for maintenance of our transportation system as a whole, for funding, being able to keep up with the necessary capacity as our population centers are increasing in numbers and use, to make sure we are meeting people's needs to be able to get to and from where they need to go safely and effectively and in a coordinated manner. So that's going to be a lot of conversation coming up. Eric Hobbig talked about the ODOT revenue allocation for the STIP and the funding outlook. And again, not a lot of good news.
Correct. Well, as far as, revenues are shrinking, and in the typical categories they have, they're looking, how's that's going to affect operations and maintenance, just keeping things falling down and pavement in a good condition. So there's going to be very limited funds for modernization. Basically, when you want to modernize a facility, maybe widen the lane or intersections, things like that. It's going to be pretty limited. And I think what they said at the meeting was that they're thinking of putting a lot of the modernization funds into that Great Streets program, which was a program to improve streets on the state system. And most of those improvements might be bicycle pedestrian improvements, but it also might be safety improvements. And it could be some improvements to capacity or other things, but focusing on those state facilities, which doesn't help us a lot here in SKATS, since we don't really have many state facilities. We have a few, but they did the Great Streets program that initially they had $50 million, and that it funded 4 projects in various parts of the state, none in our, I think there's on the coast, right?
Well, didn't Amity get one? I don't know if they got one of those, but they did do the improvements in Amity, finally fixed some of the state highway that goes through and functions as the main street in Amity.
Yeah, I do remember it was kind of spread out. It was Hermiston, there was something on the coast, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, possibly Seaside.
Yeah, I think it was Seaside.
Yeah, so it's whatever it's going to be. It's not going to be a ton of money, and it's going to have to be, selectively chosen on state facilities everywhere in the state for modernization. So
that's particularly important because the Great Streets is comprehensive. It's all modes. It's looking at doing those more urban, connected, and complete systems within city limits, cities that are on highways, but they don't have the population to warrant large investments, but they have large use. And more importantly, they need complete systems for people to have choices on how they travel. So I think that's, and so that's something we're doing with our Verta project in Keizer. That is a complete street project. Our Wheatland project, same thing. McGilchrist is a complete street project, is adding all the pieces together rather than just we're going to piecemeal and say, oh, we put in some sidewalk. Yeah, but it goes to nowhere. You have to have all of it. If it's not all there, it's not an option. So you've heard me say that a bazillion times. So really working on making sure that we understand how those dollars are going to be expended and getting the best value out of them for the systems within our urbanized areas as well as intercity. Then there was a discussion on the Oregon Transportation Plan priorities. And recently, the Oregon Transportation Plan was adopted. So Adam Argo gave a presentation on that. I think those presentations are available on the OMPOC website. Would you send out the links? Didn't Kelly send those to us?
I'll take a look at them if I can't find them there.
We'll get them all to y'all. It's really helpful.
Make a note that I need to
Yes.
do that.
Okay.
And just to give a little more perspective on that, so they did finish the plan and now the intention was not just to have a plan and just have it sit on the shelf. They scheduled a implementation stage. So that's what they started outlining at the meeting, and I forget some of the details, but they're working out the details themselves and how the long-range plan needs to be implemented and what things they'll focus on first. I did find, by the way, the 4 projects for the great streets just now.
Oh, good.
In Portland, North Lombard Street. Looks different than the one in San Francisco, I hope.
It's different.
There is Chiloquin Boulevard.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure where that is.
Chiloquin is down near
Yeah.
No, it's for the south.
Yeah, it's near Greater Lake.
Yeah, near-
Oh, okay, it's Oregon 422.
Yeah. There's the state airport in Chiloquin.
Yeah, and then Hermiston got a project, and then Gearhart got a project, Highway 101.
That was the one you were
Yeah,
thinking of. Yeah.
So nothing local here, yeah. And I would imagine something similar will happen. Maybe they could fund 4 to 8 projects, just taking a wild guess, so.
Which would be fantastic. Thank you for finding that. Then we gave our updates. There was an update on the tolling rulemaking that continues to be a source of great interest. We'll leave it there. I really appreciate that the state recognized that a lot more robust conversation needed to happen regarding tolling and particularly the impact on local residents and local cities that would be impacted, and worst of all, just a disparate impact on people who have been forced to live farther away from where they work, and push people apart, and then you're going to tax them to come into jobs. Well, we saw what happened with the coast when they failed to provide for workforce housing. They couldn't get workers. Shock. That is being addressed by some cities now, but again, if you push people farther and farther apart, it's a violation of our transportation planning rule. I think that's what they're coming up against. So, stay tuned. That little party is still underway. Then we did a roundtable. So some of the things that we got a chance to brag on for Salem-Keizer was discussion about our MPO and expansion of economic activity of the canyon with addition of Lonsdale. Talked about Aurora Donald interchange, which is a big project for us. The conversation talked about the West Side rail service, commuter rail service conversation, the Safe Routes to School expansion, adding more staffing because we're using it more. It's fabulous. Really enjoyed the Ruby Bridges walk to school events that happened this year, and that was a huge increase from 1 to 8 this year, 8 schools. I really appreciated the addition of that and the connection between human rights and walking, biking to school, rolling to school. It was just a really great programming that day that I think will be lasting. Talk to me about, we got the $1 million of redistribution funds that we heard about last month, and talked about bragging on Chariots with the commuter options strategic plan, your employer outreach, and Chariots, your ridership keeps going up. Good job. And of course, Avelo Airlines, McGill-Christ, Verda, and some of the great stuff we've got going on, and 2251 that we need to do. So that was some of the stuff we shared with the folks around the state. Did we get another meeting for the next time? I think it's in this February-ish. I don't think we have a date yet.
I don't know if we have a date. That sounds about right.
Yeah. But again, we'll be looking around the time period of the legislative session. So stay tuned for that. We'll get all the information out to all of y'all. so you can weigh in as well. That's all I have on that. And then, Mike, do you want to run through the planning status?
Sure, so the safety action plan, our consultant is working with our technical advisory committee on developing a document that talks about the emphasis areas. We have like 6 emphasis areas we selected, and then the kind of projects that would be example projects of what you do like at an intersection or a bike project or a corridor project. So we talked about it at both the advisory committee, the elected officials, steering committee, I should say, and then at the staff level technical committee. And the technical committee has been reviewing that document, providing feedback to consultants. We're meeting again coming up here in December. And I've been punching through all the public comments. I'll have that to you sometime soon because I find it fascinating to actually hear the input for the public on all these topics. And it took a long time to categorize all these things to a level that I wanted to really share and say, okay, here's 9 pages of all these comments, but it's organized in different topics, whether it's enforcement, whether it's aggressive driving, whether it's what kind of, we need more bike ped facilities and safer. So you can see what the public's really telling you and not just scattered in, multiple pages, but really kind of focused, organized, saying, what are people saying about this topic? So there'll be more to come, and we've started also talking about once we get a draft plan, what we do for outreach in the first quarter, probably of 2024, maybe March. We haven't set a date yet, but that's sometimes that first quarter or beginning of the second quarter.
Director Carney, did you have a question on that?
Yeah, I was just wondering when that group was gonna meet again to see the consultant report that Mike was talking about.
We have a date that I just went out. I think it's the 18th is when, not
Okay.
the steering committee, but the technical committee is going to get back together and look at that next version of it. And Julie's a member of that committee now. Julie Warnicki, or Hanson, sorry, Julie. Take a while to get used to saying it. Julie Hanson. The Oregon travel study, Ray Jackson is more the lead person on that, but the update is that they collected travel data over the fall from September to November, sending invitations to 300 households. There'll be another phase in 2024, getting people to participate in the study is difficult these days. You recruit people and a lot of people say no, and then you provide incentives of various levels of dollar amounts to try to entice them to participate and trying to hit certain, a representative sample. So the consultant has their methods of trying to recruit people and get them to participate. It's always a difficult thing doing that. The Turner TSP, I'm also not involved in that, but Steve and Ray are kind of monitoring the Turner TSP unless Mayor Horning has anything to share about the Turner TSP. Is he still online?
I'm leaving it to the smarter people than me.
Okay. All right. And then, as you mentioned earlier, Safe Routes to School, we did hire a half-time program assistant to help Beth Schmidt. And then we had the Ruby Bridge Walk to School events. We're working with the schools regularly to start implementing more pedestrian safety classes in the schools. I know we have these safety kits that we are sharing with the schools, and we're still kind of ramping up how this will work in the PE classes. I think there's still a lot of work to do with staff and principals and things like that. It's still kind of new to them what we're doing. And I think the event that's coming up is something like Walk and Be Seen. I don't quite have it right, but it's something close to that, where we want to make sure that kids can be out there seen, especially as it gets darker. So you see me wearing these tags where I go. And yesterday she gave me a light because it's getting so dark here. And when I leave the office at like 6 o'clock, I'm sure no one can see me crossing the street. So we want to make sure that kids are also know that they have to be seen and given materials that they can see. And then social determinants of health. Director Carney asked about that at the August meeting. And we provided her, one of my staff members who had already been kind of looking at similar things, provided her a paper regarding that topic, which is kind of broad, very broad-based. And I don't know, Director Carney, if you had any feedback about that paper?
I'm sorry to report, Mike, that I haven't had a chance to review it yet, but thank you for providing it. I appreciated the response.
Okay.
I will make sure I take time to review it before we look at the Unified Planning Work Program again, though.
Okay. My hope is that we can get the UPWP, the Planning Work Program, out earlier to you. We'll be working on it over December, and then it goes to our TAC. And I'm thinking maybe when we send it out to our TAC, we just send it out to you as well, even though the TAC hasn't reviewed it yet. So you have more time to go through that document as opposed to just having like a week. Even though
That'd be great.
we've gone over the kind of the outline. So we're following that outline generally, and we're filling it out. What we're gonna do.
Just stamp it heavily draft. So it's draft. Love that idea. All right. So that kind of brings us up to date on what work is underway. Is there anything else for the good of the order today? Counselor Phillips?
Just a quick question, and this might have been mentioned and I just missed it. When's the next MWAC meeting? Is it next month?
It's coming up.
Yes,
December 7th.
Yeah, December 7th.
I hope to have the mailing out Thursday
Okay.
of this week.
Yep.
And Councilor Phillips, we need to know about your participation next year for MWAC.
I was just emailing him about
Okay.
that.
I sent an email in. It's not
Okay.
official that I'm changing, but it's a 50-50. I might step back to alternate and someone else might be appointed, but that process from the city of Salem doesn't happen until the beginning of the next year.
Are you willing to serve another term?
50-50. I'll
50-50.
probably be the alternate, but
Okay,
for December, I'll still be the guy, and then I'll talk to Mayor Hoy, and technically, I think the mayor appoints, so we'll see. Maybe.
Keizer is true.
I just wanted to ask on our Metropolitan Transportation Safety Action Plan, how we're gonna use that information to like inform the rest of the work that we're doing. Specifically, like I'm thinking about, our work plans and.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Probably a longer answer would be better if I prepare for one, but we wanted to have this safety plan so it informs both you as a policy committee about what the potential goals are, our safety, outlook. What emphasis areas should be focused on, and how the safety plan can be used in multiple ways. One would be we change anything in our long range plans based on the safety plan information. For the local governments, can they use the safety plan to apply for local funds or federal funds that require a little more documentation that the region puts safety as a priority, and how does this project help with the goals and objectives of that plan? So it's both a kind of a policy plan and a little bit of a engineering countermeasures we could do. It won't be a long list of every safety project that's needed. The local governments really didn't want it to be that kind of plan because every safety project requires a lot of individual analysis. So we didn't want to be prescriptive saying, do this here, do that there. We wanted to give examples of things that could be done to really address those emphasis areas. So that's how it's going to be used going forward. We'll probably have other ways to use it. Being put on the spot, I'm not exactly sure all the ways we'll use it, but that's the general response of what I think we'll use it for.
does this qualify for Safe Streets for All?
Our consultant is writing it up, so it's a Safe Streets for All type of plan. Yeah.
There's federal funding that specifically requires projects to be in a safety action plan. So that makes it eligible for that fund, those projects eligible for that funding.
Yeah, I was looking at the TAC agenda, and there's kind of those top 20 areas of those intersections and whatnot. It goes to a pretty big jump from a ranking of like 115 or something to like 300 something, and I was like, whoa, what are we gonna do to address, like, I mean, all 20 are important and everything else beyond is also important, but just like seeing that kind of like ranking and number, I think it was like commercial. I don't remember
Right.
specifically where, but yeah, I was like, ooh.
Yeah, and that specifically was work we did in-house. One of my staff members kind of took the methodology used in Portland to rank corridors based on, it's a whole thing about crashes, but also weighting the vulnerability of pedestrians and bicyclists a little more than vehicles. And then creating a score and then showing you on a map how those corridors kind of rank. So the consultant may use it, but they didn't develop it at all. And we wanted to use it and develop it in-house, so we keep updating it as fresh information comes in.
As a general purpose government, what it does for, say, a city of Keizer, as we're looking at federally eligible projects, but also our local projects, because in our transportation system plan is pretty comprehensive, but with this level of detail available to us, we can do a better job of addressing a section need, let's say around a school, saying, we understand that these are options now available to us with this additional data. It can make us eligible for other funding sources, but it also can help inform us for design of what we can do and what might be more effective. So we have projects identified, but they're not granular. They don't go to that level of detail until we're getting closer to obligating those projects, either with these dollars or our local transportation dollars through the gas tax. So it'll inform both.
Yeah, I remember in your TSP, like for at Verda and Chemawa, the plan that said put a signal or a roundabout, kind of left it up to the more engineering decision for a later date.
Right.
And similar, our plan is not going to be saying put a roundabout here or put a signal here. So it takes that extra steps to do that.
Right. So I hope that helps on what it looks like on a city level.
Yeah, yeah, and I was mostly thinking too, based on like some conversations that I've been having with like school district staff on those safety issues, like high schools not being designated, but like having designated school zones and like crosswalk improvements, stuff like that.
Yeah, we're doing a project I could talk to you about near McNary, but that's a local project. And it's not going to show up here, but we're addressing the same thing there. So what will happen with, this information is going to inform both. So we'll get a better bang for the buck.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, great question. All right, anything else for today, Teresa?
Some housekeeping while I have everybody corralled on Zoom. Trevor, Janelle still on, and Mayor Horning, do you still require all your materials sent to you hard copy, or do you want them digitally?
I do not need hard copy.
I appreciate the hard copies. I use them.
So Trevor, you need hard copies. Mayor Horning, you do not?
I do not. They're actually sent to the city, and so I usually pull them up and print the pages I want to print.
Perfect. And Janelle, do you still need a hard copy? Can't hear you.
She's unmuted.
No.
No. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Just put in the chat. There you go. All right. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Okay.
And once again, Teresa will contact you later this week to confirm about the January meeting.
Yeah.
And see if we can get that deal structured discussion.
Fantastic. Well, the time is 1:30 and everybody have a very happy and safe and fulfilling holiday season, and we will see you in the new year. This meeting is adjourned.